that work come here, then it's very difficult for that kind of progression to happen, and you know, these artists to really kind of go into these really different areas and to provoke that kind of audience space. But also to the way that art in a public space gives permission for a different type of engagement. So like this thing of going to a gallery and having to have the art mind and really understand what's happening. And actually there's something for me in my work that's about giving a permission to engage with it in whichever way makes sense, and actually to start to engage with the work in the way that we would have done when we were children, which is very freely, and kind of really responding to what we see rather than trying to understand the intellect of it. And there's something about finding that playful engagement for both the local artists and their development, like investing in time to experiment and get it wrong. It's really important. Like that opportunity to fail is an important part of everyone's development. So there's something about making sure that there is that kind of investment in that, and the investment in the possibility of stuff. So, you know, things about not having the right papers to dance in the street, well then that has to that's the kind of thing that has to change.
I think that
because if there are those layers of bureaucracy in front of it, then artists will never have that freedom to kind of go and do these things. And there's physical forms like parkour that, like, they go and they reclaim an urban space, and they make it playful, and they make it something else, and a wall no longer becomes a border, it becomes something to climb, it becomes something to work with. And that's, for me, that's what art in public spaces does.
Of course.
Like my 3 performances have all been in a gallery. So they've been in this kind of public space, but actually it's in a very, it's one that's probably accessible in a cultural sense to a very small amount of people, because we have this kind of this art thing of going like, I'm not allowed to access that, I don't have permission to access that. And so for me the provocation was about how we view that artwork when we're in an art space, how we have a response that's not just intellectual to it.
The word you said there, playfulness, is a really big one.
Yeah, it's pretty important.
Because playfulness allows you to deal with stuff that's maybe more difficult. Like you were saying, some of your past is very difficult. But playfulness in there, that changes everything.
Change the everyday life of the people for a little moment. You are going to work, crossing the street, and then you see these 8 actors doing just crossing in another way, in another rhythm. You stay, what's going on? Why? And this is already something that is huge when you transform in a performance, in a meaning, etc., etc. I was thinking, there is so many things here. I was talking with the local artists, and I say, why not to take 4 tuk-tuks, do a performance for 2 people in the tuk-tuk.
That's so true.
And going around 2 spaces that they never will go, and in these spaces there is a story that belong to the space, to the markets, etc., etc. And they were, yes. Now I say, okay, let's write a show, let's produce the show, and it will be a Sri Lankan show.
That's amazing.
But not only for Sri Lanka. You can export.
Of course.
Better than tea and all what you have. You export culture. And then you go to festival in France, in Italy, and you see a Sri Lankan show that is universal stories.
That is so true.
This will be great. And this is a very good passport, diplomatic passport to your country for all the world. In a not only Colombo Biennale, but there is many Biennale, Venezia Biennale, and there is a Sri Lankan show. Wow, this will be great. And for sure, the door will be open, because I think that Europe and the Western countries need new confrontation, new ideas, etc. So why not? It's not so difficult. It's just do it.
It's just that there has to be a push from somewhere for the artist in Colombo.
You at home, push, just keep pushing.
Yes, indeed. There has to be some sort of encouragement.
Wake up!
I know. People in Colombo, wake up, get into arts immediately. All right, so now it's quite interesting that you said everything that you actually stated right now made me think that Sri Lanka actually has the potential to contribute to arts in Colombo in small ways like that, and actually represent Sri Lanka in that small way, but make it really big out there. So it's quite interesting to speak about Sri Lanka in that manner, in such a positive manner, especially after Independence Day. So on that note, we have to go for a very short commercial break, but we'll be right back with these three wonderful artists.
You can call me.
We are having so much fun in the studio right now. Welcome back to Good Morning Sri Lanka. Tom and Thor and Adrian are here to represent the Colombo Arts Biennale, and we were discussing how arts in Colombo can be developed, improved, and how we can make a big name out there for Sri Lanka if we actually invest in our local arts and our local artists. So now moving on from there, I would like to ask you three about your individual art history and how you contribute to the world arts, because I'm sure that the audience and the viewers out there would really love to know more about you. So why don't we start with
Thor. Our friend Thor.
Let's start with Thor.
Okay, so what's the question about where it started?
About yourself. Yes.
What you like to eat? And
Yes, we can say that also.
Yeah, I do like to eat.
Do you like Sri Lankan food, by the way?
Look, I learned yesterday.
Okay. What's that? What are you doing, Adrian?
The rice,
Right.
curry, and
Right. So do you actually enjoy Sri Lankan food? Because I know that for
Yeah.
people
wonderful.
outside, it must
It's
be a
wonderful.
little bit spicy.
Took me 5 days to take the
It's
spoon
not spicy
out.
at all?
and
No, it's okay.
Yeah.
All right. That's
Now I
very
do.
interesting.
To be honest,
Alright.
what seems to happen is things get underspiced because they think that you can't.
All right. So let's
Anyway, where were we?
about you.
Okay, I fine arts my background, but the kind of my work all probably stemmed out of the fact of working with. I was pulling apart old TVs and looking at them as sculptural things, and kind of investigating them, giving myself shocks, that kind of thing. And then I was looking at it also as a whole kind of mass medium and how does it work. And then I kind of discovered that if you pulled the TV screen away from if you separated those two things, the TV and the sound, the visual and the sound, and you got rid of the screen bit and you just had the sound still, then you start having something that it wants to latch on to something else because it's lost its visual partner. And then it ends up being, so since then I've been working with sound and objects and sound and spaces. So I really like the way sound is always some element in my work, but it's always kind of physical, sculptural and spatial. But you can start creating a soundtrack for a space. And one of the reasons why I like working in public spaces, as I said before, is about how you interact with an audience, but also you can find a space and you can just subtly tweak it sometimes by just adding a kind of sound element within it. Or you can reawaken spaces, so sometimes finding like an old bandstand that had been closed for 30 years and reawakened it for a month with a surround sound piece that was in the bandstand. And commissioned artists from all different backgrounds to create work for it. That's that kind of thing. Sometimes working with, I was talking earlier with starling birds and the murmuration of starlings. I'm now going blank about what on earth I do.
So I'm reading quite something interesting in my rundown. It says that you are the creative director of 2 arts organizations. Let's talk about that.
One of them I'm unfortunately responsible for. The other one I unfortunately joined.
Why do you say that it's unfortunate that you joined?
A swarm is a kind of arts org that pulls on a kind of network of people that when we require bigger events or require more people. But the idea is it's a kind of fluxus kind of group. And sometimes that's just one person, it's me, and sometimes it's a whole group of us. And then Stream Arts is a public arts organisation in London that do a lot of projects again in public space.
So Aswam and Stream Arts,
different things.
They're both located?
Both in London, and Stream Arts is an arts charity. Of which I'm a director on the board of. But yeah, one of the things that interests me a lot about work now, the project that I'm doing now, most of the time I'm doing one-off projects that are always just dealing with one creation of a place and one space, one scenario, and you always find you're kind of reinventing the wheel.
Yes.
And with this project, I kind of wanted to build something that could keep evolving and changing a bit, so it would keep me interested, but I would have some kind of basis. So this project, The Speakers, that's at Goethe Institute, has been going for about 2 years. And it started when I was watching the revolution in Tahrir Square in Egypt, and all the tweets that people were sending out from the square on their phones, and reading those, I was like, this is almost like script, and that all these people are describing their very extreme experiences, but putting it, like I said earlier, onto this kind of weird plastic land of Justin Bieber and Lady Gaga, and I wanted to take it out of that and put it back into a real space.
Yeah.
And so that's then become a kind of evolving thing. So now each time I do the project in a different location, I'm drawing on this kind of past gathering of stuff, of recordings and of voices from different people in their kind of defending their public spaces. And so when I come to Sri Lanka, it was, okay, what would be an interesting event to try and cover in Sri Lanka that would have some relation to these other things, like the Revolution Tahrir Square or Gezi Park in Turkey, where basically Gezi Park's an interesting one because it's a public park that was they wanted to turn into a shopping mall.
Yes.
And this privatization of public space is something that's really difficult, and I think that's something that's a little bit tricky in Sri Lanka at the moment, where because there's this development boom going on, you've also got this dichotomy, this problem of public. When a public space becomes developed, it becomes privatized,
Of course.
and then we suddenly lose all our rights over it. And one thing that this piece is about is trying to remind people of that public space is something that's for us, and we own it. The state doesn't own it. The companies shouldn't own it. It's ours. And that's a fundamental kind of right to have public space, and that's why Vela Varia was interesting, because it was about water, and that's a public space and a public right.
I think there should be awareness created in Colombo more about what you said right now, because when it comes to permissiveness and legal authorities, there's a huge problem of who really owns public space in Colombo. So I think coming out of a very tarnished era of a conflict, I think people have lost their awareness about where they belong and what actually belongs to them. So that was quite interesting what you said. So if you move on to Tom, maybe? What have you been doing this year, since January? And anything that you have, any touch points that you would like to touch about your career?
Yeah, so I originally trained in dance and dance theatre, and have worked for a number of companies in the UK and Europe, and now perform a lot of theatre work as well. And I'm actually in Sri Lanka on the same residency as Thor, though I've just started mine kind of 2 weeks ago. And I'm here to work in writing. So I'm writing new work and collating kind of Sri Lankan poets and trying to see what the response might be there.
Interesting.
So, yeah, since being here, that's kind of been my focus.
All right. So you're talking about Sri Lankan poets. Any particular poetry that
in fact, I met a poet on Monday.
Really?
I was very privileged to meet a poet, Vivi Marie van der Poorten.
Yes.
I couldn't find her first collection anywhere, and she was kind enough to track some down for me. So, certainly her, and then she's given me kind of a list of other folk, and I've been into various bookstores in Gaul and Colombo and Hikkadur, and kind of have now a stack of poetry.
That's amazing.
That's and I'm slowly kind of working through it to find out. So there's no other names that kind of jump up, but Vivi Marie's, it's beautiful poetry.
I know.
She's very,
she's one of my personal favorites as well.
And very kind of contemporary to the work that comes out of the US and Europe, and
that's amazing.
Like, there's a really beautiful kind of communication through the poetry of this idea of the local specifics, but also the universality. Like when a poet really makes sense of it, it makes sense to whatever culture you're from.
Of course.
Even with the specifics of the thing, there's you make these comparisons very easily.
Exactly.
So it was a real privilege to meet her earlier.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
All right, so you were speaking of dance theatre. Theatre is not new to Colombo, but dance theatre is kind of a new aspect of it. Maybe the viewers might not know what it really is. Can you tell the viewers what exactly dance theatre is and how it can contribute to theatre as a